The front door clicked shut behind me with a sound that felt too loud in the stillness of the night. The clock on the wall read 12:15 a.m., but the house was eerily quiet. My heels echoed through the hallway as I made my way into the living room, the soft hum of the muted TV filling the silence like an invisible presence. There he was, Daniel, sitting motionless on the couch, bathed in the dim light of the screen. His posture was too perfect, too still, and when he turned to face me, his eyes locked onto mine with a depth that made my chest tighten. He didn't smile, didn't say anything at first. He just stared, his gaze unwavering. "You're late," he said, his voice cool and calm. It wasn't a question. It was a statement that carried the weight of something unsaid, something heavy, lurking just beneath the surface. I smiled weakly, trying to play it off. "The party ran late," I said, shrugging out of my coat and hanging it up with more effort than necessary. "You know how it is, music, drinks, catching up." But the moment the words left my lips, I felt how hollow they were, how rehearsed, how far from the truth. Before we dive deeper into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments whether you're joining from a bustling city, a quiet town, or somewhere in between. I'd love to hear from you. And if you're ready, let's get started. The air in the house felt thick, heavy with a tension that neither of us had addressed directly, but had been building for months. I could feel Daniel's eyes on me as I set my bag down, the weight of his gaze pulling me back into the moment. The silence that filled the space between us was deafening. I tried to focus on the simple act of removing my shoes, anything to keep my hands busy, to avoid the gaze that felt like it could see straight through me. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk to him. It was that I wasn't sure what to say anymore. I had stopped knowing the words a long time ago. It wasn't always like this. I remembered a time when we laughed, when we talked late into the night about everything and nothing. But somewhere along the way, those moments faded, and in their place came the emptiness, the routine, the silence that had settled like dust on everything we once were. Daniel had become a ghost to me, a presence I lived with, but no longer felt. I glanced back at him, his face unchanged, his eyes still locked on mine. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but nothing came. It was like we were stuck in this frozen moment, both of us holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. "Everything okay?" I asked, the words sounding strange in my mouth. I wasn't sure if I was asking him or myself. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just picked up the glass of whiskey on the coffee table, swirling it slowly. His gaze never wavered from me as he took a sip, his lips pressing against the rim with deliberate slowness. The quiet stretched on for what felt like forever, and I could feel my heart racing. I had done something tonight, something I wasn't sure I could explain to him, or to myself for that matter. The party, the people, the men, the attention I had received. The thing was, it wasn't just about them. It wasn't about the thrill of feeling desired, though that had been an undeniable rush. It was about me, about something I had lost somewhere along the way. And I wasn't sure if I could ever get it back, but I had tried tonight, tried to remember what it felt like to feel seen, to feel alive. But now, standing here, I felt the weight of my own choices pressing down on me. The guilt had crept in the moment I walked out of that party, and it hadn't let up since. What did that make me? Who was I becoming? How was it? Daniel asked, his voice cutting through the haze of my thoughts. His question seemed simple enough, but it felt like a challenge. His eyes searched mine, as if he already knew more than I was willing to admit. I took a breath, gathering the fragments of myself that I feared were slipping away. "It was fine," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "Just a night out." I tried to smile, but it was weak, fleeting, too fragile to hide the truth. The truth that the woman who had walked into that party wasn't the same woman standing in front of him now. I wasn't sure if she was gone for good, or if she could ever return. But what I did know was that everything was about to change. This, whatever we were pretending to hold on to, couldn't last. Something had shifted tonight, and there was no going back. The evening air was warm, but I still felt the weight of my coat as I stepped into the dimly lit hall of the building Mia had directed me to. The excitement of the night pulsed in the air, vibrant and unfamiliar. The door had barely shut behind me when I was met with a rush of voices and music that made my heart beat faster. The steady hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, the low thrum of bass. It all felt like a stark contrast to the emptiness of home. I glanced around, letting the scene wash over me. People were laughing, talking, mingling. A group of men clustered near the bar, chatting animatedly with a few women. Everyone seemed to know each other, their smiles genuine, their energy contagious. Mia found me almost immediately, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "You came," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so glad. You deserve this." I smiled, though it felt a little strained. I didn't know what I deserved anymore. I hadn't felt alive in so long, and that feeling of being seen, of being wanted, was a distant memory. But as I looked around at the crowd, at the vibrant faces and the freedom in the air, I felt that faint spark of something. Maybe this was what I needed. "I'm glad I came," I said, though even I wasn't sure if I was telling the truth. Mia led me through the crowd, making introductions here and there. I smiled, nodded, but my mind was already drifting. My eyes kept returning to the men, their laughter, the way they stood in groups, easy and confident. Every glance felt like an invitation, an unspoken question. "Do you want to be a part of this?" It wasn't a thought I lingered on, not really. But when my gaze landed on him, on Andrew, it was like time slowed for a moment. Tall, with dark hair that looked deliberately tousled and a smile that could make any room feel warmer, Andrew stood at the far end of the room. He was surrounded by a group of friends, but it wasn't his friends that caught my attention. It was the way he stood, relaxed, yet somehow different from everyone else. There was a calmness to him, like he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just there, in a way that felt like he'd been waiting for something. Maybe he had been waiting for me. I didn't approach him immediately, but I could feel him watching me from across the room. His eyes, dark and inviting, followed my every movement. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was familiar. I couldn't explain why I felt drawn to him in that moment, but I did. It wasn't the way his jawline caught the light or the way his shirt fit him just right. It was the way he made the room feel smaller, more intimate. Before I could turn away, he crossed the room toward me, his stride effortless, his smile never faltering. "Olivia, right?" His voice was smooth, confident, yet not overpowering. I nodded, surprised by how my name sounded on his lips. "Yeah, that's me." "I'm Andrew," he said, extending his hand. The handshake was firm, warm. There was something in the way he held my gaze that made it feel more like an invitation than a greeting. "So what brings you to a party like this?" he asked, though his question was more about me than about the event. It wasn't idle small talk. It was a kind of question that cut through all the layers, straight to the part of me I wasn't sure I even remembered. I hesitated, unsure how to answer without sounding too lost. "I guess I needed a change of pace," I said finally. "Things have gotten kind of dull." He smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "I get it," he said. "Sometimes you just need to feel something again. A break from the usual." I wanted to say more, to tell him that I had been suffocating, that I hadn't felt truly alive in what felt like years. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, allowing the words to hang in the air between us. We moved to the bar, and from that moment on, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything and nothing. Music, movies, love, life. Things that felt far removed from the sterile routine I had settled into with Daniel. There was no awkwardness, no pauses that begged for something to be said. It was just easy. The more we spoke, the more I realized how starved I was for this kind of connection. With Daniel, everything was mechanical. Conversations were brief, functional, like we were both simply going through the motions. But with Andrew, there was an energy between us, an unspoken understanding that I hadn't felt in so long. For a while, I lost myself in the night, in the conversation, in the attention. Andrew's presence was a balm to the wounds I had tried to ignore. I laughed more than I had in months. I felt seen again, like I wasn't invisible. But underneath it all, guilt gnawed at me, lurking in the back of my mind like an unwanted guest. It wasn't about Andrew, not really. It was about the choices I had made, the path I was walking down. I kept telling myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that I wasn't looking for anything more than a distraction, something to break free from the cage I had put myself in. But even as I told myself that, I knew it wasn't true. I had crossed a line the moment I stepped into this party. And now, with Andrew standing before me, I wasn't sure where the line was anymore. We danced for a while, the music pulsing through my body, reminding me of a version of myself I had forgotten existed. But the truth settled in gradually, like a weight on my chest. I wasn't finding anything in this night. I was running from something. When I finally pulled away, excusing myself for a moment, I found a quiet corner of the room. The laughter and chatter continued around me, but all I could hear was the thundering of my own thoughts. I wasn't sure what I was looking for here, but the longer I stayed, the more I realized I was only chasing a feeling that couldn't be caught. I had come here to feel alive again, but all I had found was an empty promise. The moment I left the party that night, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. The excitement, the attention, it had felt good, sure. But it hadn't filled the emptiness I had hoped it would. It hadn't fixed me. And the man I had been drawn to? Andrew was a symbol of everything I thought I was missing, but he wasn't the answer. I wasn't sure what was. I only knew that when I walked back through that door into my house, nothing was going to be the same. The cool air hit my face as I stepped out of the car, my hands still shaking from the drive. The night had been full of excitement, a kind of false liberation that left me hollow as soon as the moment passed. The house loomed ahead, quiet and still, its shadows stretching longer than they should in the soft glow of the streetlight. I hadn't expected to feel anything when I left the party. In my mind, it was all about the escape, just a temporary fix to soothe the ache of my own discontent. But as I stood at the front door, my heart was heavy with something else entirely. Guilt. Maybe even fear. I wasn't sure anymore. I pushed the door open, the familiar sound of it creaking as it always did in the silence of the house. The house felt colder tonight, emptier somehow. I had been running from this moment all evening, but now that I was back, I couldn't escape it. I didn't need to look around the corner to know where he was. The living room was always his domain at this hour, the dim light of the TV flickering off the walls in muted blues and grays. He was there. Daniel sat on the couch, his back straight, his hands folded neatly in his lap. His gaze was locked on the muted television, but I could feel his eyes on me, even without seeing them. The stillness of the room pressed down on me, and my breath caught in my throat. "You're home late," Daniel said, his voice calm, even, like it always was. It wasn't an accusation, not in the way I expected. His tone was measured, controlled. But there was something behind it. I wanted to brush it off, pretend everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment I entered that door, everything was different. "I told you the party ran late," I said, my voice too light, too practiced. You know how these things go. I kicked off my shoes and stepped into the living room, trying to act like nothing was out of the ordinary. But even as I moved, I could feel Daniel's eyes on me, observing every step, every small motion. There was something in his gaze that made me pause, a quiet intensity that unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. He didn't speak again for a long moment, just watched me as I moved around the room. But his silence wasn't comforting. It was heavy, loaded with the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Then, finally, he broke it. I saw the picture. The words hung in the air like a curse. My heart skipped a beat. I froze mid-step, my hand still on the back of the couch, my body tense with the sudden shock of hearing it. The picture. I repeated, feigning confusion, though I already knew exactly what he meant. The one from the party, Daniel said. His voice was still calm, but there was a sharpness to it now, like the edge of a blade waiting to cut through the tension. You were laughing with him. Andrew, was it? I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The photo. A candid shot someone had snapped of Andrew and me, laughing together, our faces close in a way that looked too familiar, too intimate. It wasn't a scandalous photo, not in any obvious way. But the closeness, the way we had shared that moment, was something I hadn't even realized at the time. It was the kind of thing that made it impossible to deny. There was something happening between us. I swallowed hard, trying to push the panic down. It's just a picture, Daniel. People were having fun, laughing. It doesn't mean anything. But as the words left my lips, I could see the way his eyes narrowed, the way his posture remained rigid. He wasn't angry, not in the way I had expected. There was no shouting, no accusations flying from his lips. It was worse than that. It was the stillness. Daniel didn't need to yell at me. He didn't need to hurl accusations. His silence was a weapon all its own. I know, he said, his voice flat. It's not about the picture. It's about what's been missing for a long time, isn't it? I stood there, my hand shaking slightly, unsure of how to respond. It was like he had pulled back the curtain on a truth we had both been avoiding for months, maybe longer. The distance between us, the absence of anything resembling intimacy or connection. I had been trying to fill that void tonight, with Andrew, with the attention of strangers. But the truth, the reality, was that I hadn't filled it. I had only made it worse. I don't know what you want me to say, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I wasn't trying to hurt you. You didn't need to, Daniel replied, his voice steady but thick with something I couldn't place. Hurt, maybe. Or resignation. You already have. I felt a lump form in my throat, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't about the picture. It was about something deeper, something that neither of us had acknowledged until now. The space between us had been growing for so long that I didn't even notice it happening. The last time we had been close, I couldn't even remember. I didn't go there to hurt you, I said, my voice trembling now. I needed something. I needed to feel alive again, Daniel. I've been drowning here, in this house, in this marriage. I didn't know how to fix it, but I knew I had to try something. Daniel's expression softened, just slightly, but the hurt in his eyes didn't disappear. And what did you find, Olivia? What did you get from that party, from Andrew? Did you find what you were looking for? I opened my mouth to answer, but the truth was too raw, too painful. The answer was no, of course. I hadn't found anything. I hadn't found myself. I hadn't found any of the connection I was hoping for. I hadn't found anything except a deeper emptiness. I don't know, I whispered, my voice breaking under the weight of it all. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. I think you do. And in that moment, I knew he was right. I had hoped that the night, the attention, would fill the void. But it hadn't. It couldn't. Not when I had been ignoring the real problem all along. Our marriage had been empty long before tonight. The air between us was thick, charged with the weight of things left unsaid. Daniel's eyes, once steady and calm, now reflected a quiet hurt that I wasn't sure how to soothe. I had walked into this house with the false hope that we could somehow salvage something, anything, from this marriage. But now, standing in front of him, I saw the truth in his eyes. The same truth I had been avoiding for months. Years, maybe. I didn't go there for Andrew, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper, the words trembling as they left my lips. I didn't go to find another man. I went to find myself. The silence that followed my confession was oppressive. It wasn't the angry kind of silence that I expected. It wasn't filled with shouting or accusations. It was something much worse, the kind of silence that speaks of deep, unspoken wounds. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you've already lost, even if the words haven't yet fully left your mouth. Daniel didn't respond immediately. His eyes stayed locked on mine, but his expression was unreadable. He looked like he was waiting for me to say something more, or maybe he was hoping that I would take it all back. But I couldn't. I couldn't lie anymore, not to him, not to myself. I didn't realize it at first, I continued, taking a shaky breath. But when Mia invited me to the party, I thought maybe it would be different. I thought maybe for one night I could feel like I mattered again. Like I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. Like I could remember who I was before all of this, before the routine, before the silence, before us. Daniel's face remained impassive, but I could see the faintest shift in his eyes. Something had clicked, a realization that I hadn't been expecting. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was just listening. And in that moment, I could tell that he was seeing me for the first time in a long time. I've been suffocating in this marriage, Daniel, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the words. I didn't go there for another man's attention. I went because I needed to remind myself that I was alive, that I wasn't just going through the motions, that I wasn't invisible. I'm not even sure how it happened, but I stopped being me a long time ago. Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he might say something. But instead, he remained silent, his gaze never leaving mine. I could almost see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed what I had said. I wasn't sure if he was just hearing my words, or if he was finally beginning to understand what had been happening between us for so long. I don't know how to fix this, I whispered, my hands trembling as I folded them in front of me. I don't know if I can, but I needed to tell you the truth. I needed you to know that it's not about anyone else. It's about me. I've been trying to fill a void, Daniel, but now I see that I'm the one who created it. The tears were close now, threatening to spill over, but I held them back. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. But the weight of everything, the emptiness in our home, the distance between us, the secrets I had kept, was too much. Daniel's eyes softened, and for the first time that night, he moved. He shifted on the couch, his hand reaching out slowly, almost tentatively, as if he wasn't sure if I would pull away. But I didn't. I let him take my hand, his fingers warm against my cold skin. I didn't know you were feeling like this, he said quietly, his voice full of regret. I didn't realize. I didn't see it. All this time, I thought everything was fine. I thought you were just tired, I guess. I wanted to say something to reassure him, to tell him that it wasn't entirely his fault, that I had been drifting too. But the words caught in my throat, stuck behind the years of neglect and silence we had allowed to pile up between us. I didn't know how to tell you, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you, but I've been dying inside, Daniel. I've been so empty. I don't know how to keep pretending that everything's okay. His grip on my hand tightened slightly, but he didn't pull me closer. He just held my hand there, between us, like a quiet acknowledgement of what was happening. The weight of his touch wasn't comforting. Not yet. It was just another reminder that the distance between us had already become too great to bridge with mere words. For the first time in a long time, I saw the pain in Daniel's eyes. The kind of pain that comes from realizing you've lost something, but you're not sure when it slipped away. It wasn't anger, not the rage that I had expected from him. It was sorrow. A quiet, deep sorrow. "I didn't know you were that unhappy," he said, his voice soft but pained. "I didn't realize. I didn't know that I wasn't enough. That I was enough for you." The words hung in the air like a weight, heavier than anything I had ever heard from him. I opened my mouth to say something, to try to explain that it wasn't about him, not really, but the words wouldn't come. The truth was that we had both been neglecting our marriage for so long, neither of us realizing how far we had drifted until it was too late. "I thought if we just kept going, kept pretending, it would get better," I said, the tears finally escaping. But it didn't. "And now I don't know if we can fix it." Daniel's eyes softened even more, but there was a new distance between us now, one that hadn't been there before. It wasn't anger or frustration. It was the quiet acceptance that maybe what we had was already broken. And the more I spoke, the more I realized that it wasn't just the party or Andrew or any other distraction. The damage had been done long before I ever walked into that room. It was too late to save what we once had. And that truth settled into my bones like a cold, hard fact. As Daniel sat quietly beside me, his hand still holding mine, but no longer offering the comfort I had so desperately needed, I realized something. I had been so focused on trying to find myself, trying to reclaim the parts of me I had lost, that I hadn't realized I was breaking something irreplaceable in the process. Our marriage had been eroding beneath the surface for months, years even. The cracks had been there, widening quietly, unnoticed by both of us until it was too late to patch them up. In trying to find myself, I had damaged something that might never be repaired. And that realization, the finality of it, was what hurt the most. The days that followed the confession were suffocating. The house, once filled with the hum of everyday life, felt hollow. The usual rhythm, grocery shopping, paying bills, sorting out the small details of life, remained unchanged, but the silence between us was deafening. We had become masters of avoiding eye contact, of moving around each other in the house like two strangers living parallel lives. The tension was so thick that every word felt like it could shatter the fragile truce we were trying to maintain. Every attempt at normalcy felt like a farce. Daniel's silence was the loudest thing in the room. It wasn't the silence of someone who was angry or someone who had given up. It was the silence of someone who had already withdrawn, who had resigned himself to the slow erosion of something that had once mattered. His eyes had grown distant, and his words became fewer with each passing day. His gestures, once so tender, now felt stiff, mechanical. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply stopped trying. I noticed the way he moved in the kitchen, now, efficient but detached, as if he was just going through the motions. The same motions I had been stuck in for so long. And when we passed each other in the hallway, there was no longer that brief, casual touch, that simple acknowledgement of the other's presence. It was as though we were both afraid of breaking the fragile silence that had become our new normal. I tried to keep up the pretense. I cleaned the house a little more, tried to cook meals like I used to, but everything felt like an attempt to breathe life into something that was already dead. Daniel didn't react. He ate his meals without a word, his gaze focused somewhere far beyond the table, as if I wasn't even sitting there with him. It wasn't just the silence that tore me apart, it was the indifference. There were no more questions, no more attempts to connect. He had stopped caring, stopped asking about my day, stopped wondering if I was okay. He had become a ghost, existing in the same space as me, but not truly with me. And in some ways, I felt like I had become the same for him. The emptiness in the house was suffocating, and I couldn't escape it. Every time I walked into the living room and saw him sitting there, his face expressionless, I felt a pit in my stomach. Every word I tried to say felt like an intrusion. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't even know if it could be fixed. One evening, after another quiet dinner that felt more like a formality than a meal, I tried again. I reached for his hand across the table, my fingers brushing against his. His hand was cold, stiff. I squeezed gently, hoping to feel some spark, some response, but there was nothing. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaky. "Can we talk? Please." He didn't respond immediately. His eyes flickered over to mine for a moment, then back down to his plate. He nodded once, a slow, reluctant motion that sent a fresh wave of frustration through me. "I just want to fix this," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what happened between us, but I want to try again. I don't want to lose you." His gaze met mine, and for the briefest moment I saw something in his eyes, something fleeting, something painful. But it was gone before I could hold on to it. He slowly pulled his hand away from mine, the distance between us growing like an insurmountable chasm. "I don't think you can fix it," Daniel said quietly. His words were a knife, sharp and cutting, but there was no anger in them, only sadness. "I don't think you can fix what's been broken for so long." My chest tightened as his words sank in. I wanted to scream, to argue, to tell him that I could fix it, that I could change. But deep down I knew he was right. We had been broken for a long time, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't glue us back together. The rest of the evening passed in silence, and I could feel the wall between us growing taller, thicker. I tried again the next morning, making his favorite coffee, setting the table as if nothing had changed. I tried to initiate conversation, but it was always the same. His short answers, his lack of interest. It was like I was trying to talk to a wall. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to bring him back to me, to fix the shattered pieces of us. So I kept trying, pushing, reaching, but every attempt only seemed to push him further away. It was a few nights later when the breaking point finally came. I had been lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard him get up. The soft creak of the floorboards, the rustle of his shirt as he moved. He walked out into the living room, and I knew he was trying to avoid me. But something inside me snapped, and I followed him, my bare feet patting softly against the floor. "Daniel," I said softly, standing in the doorway, watching him sit on the couch with his head in his hands. He didn't respond. "Please talk to me," I said, stepping into the room. "I can't do this anymore. I need to know what you're thinking." He sat there for a moment, the tension in his body palpable. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes were raw with emotion. He looked at me, his gaze unwavering, but there was no anger, no accusation, just pain. "Do you still love me, Olivia?" His voice was quiet, but it felt like the world was crashing down around me as he spoke. I froze, the question cutting through me like a blade. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that question until it was out in the open. "Do you still love me?" The words hung in the air, unanswered. I could feel the weight of everything in that moment, the years of silence, the distance, the lies. I felt the truth in my chest, a heavy, suffocating truth that I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I opened my mouth to answer, but the truth was too much to put into words. I didn't know if I still loved him in the way he needed me to, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. I looked at him, his face etched with desperation, and I realized something. This wasn't just about love. This was about everything we had neglected, everything we had let slip through our fingers. And I didn't know if we could get it back. But in that moment, I understood that our marriage had already cracked. And no amount of trying, no amount of words, could change that now. The days after Daniel's question felt like they were suspended in time, a slow-motion replay of everything that had led us to this point. I went through the motions of our daily routine, but everything felt different now. The air between us was thick with a weight of our unsaid truths, and I could feel the edges of my own decisions pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. I had spent so long trying to escape the silence, the suffocating emptiness in our marriage, that I didn't realize until now I had been the one to stop trying. I had crossed a line. I had gone searching for something outside of our marriage, believing it would make me feel alive again, but all it did was deepen the chasm between us. I couldn't undo what had been done. I couldn't unring the bell. The distance between us was no longer just a gap, it was a canyon, too wide and too deep to cross. Daniel had stopped fighting. It wasn't that he didn't care, but rather that he had accepted what I had refused to see for so long. The truth of our marriage had been hanging in the air for months, no years, but I had been too caught up in my own unhappiness to notice. And now it was too late. I had asked him to try to fight for us, but he had already given up. And in some strange way, I understood. He had waited long enough for something from me that I had never been able to give. As I sat in the quiet of the house, I couldn't help but feel the sharpness of what was slipping away. I had created this mess. I had made the choices that led us here, and now I was left to deal with the aftermath. The loneliness that filled the room was suffocating, but it was a loneliness I had earned. When Daniel came to me a few days later, there was no anger in his eyes, no raised voice, no tears, just quiet resignation. "I think it's time for me to go," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the emotion I had expected. There was no fury, no blame, just acceptance. I didn't know how to respond. A part of me wanted to beg him to stay, to somehow fix everything. But I knew that pleading wouldn't solve anything. I had already broken it, and now I had to face the consequences of my own actions. "I understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to come to this. I never wanted you to feel like this." Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze shifting away from me, looking anywhere but at me. "I know. I think we both lost our way somewhere along the line." He stood up, the finality of his words hanging in the air like a funeral bell. "I'm not leaving because I'm angry. I'm leaving because I don't think we can fix this. I don't think we can go back." I nodded, the lump in my throat making it impossible to speak. I couldn't bear to watch him leave, but I knew I couldn't stop him. He was already gone in every way that mattered. This wasn't a dramatic exit. It wasn't a fight. It was just a quiet end. As he packed his things over the next few days, I tried to hold on to the scraps of the past, but they slipped through my fingers like sand. The house, once filled with the noise of our arguments, our laughter, our life together, now felt empty in a way I hadn't experienced before. Each item he packed away, the pictures, the clothes, the small tokens of a life we had built, was a reminder of what had been lost. The morning he left, I stood in the doorway, watching him carry his last box to the car. The finality of it hit me all at once. I wanted to run to him, to stop him, to ask him to stay. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the weight of what I had done. "I'll be in touch," he said, not looking at me. "But I think it's better if we take some time apart." I nodded, swallowing the ache in my chest. "I understand," I whispered. And then he was gone. The emptiness in the house was deafening. I sank onto the couch, my hands in my lap, the quiet pressing in on me from all sides. For a long time, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was sit in the stillness, the echo of his absence louder than any noise. In the days that followed, I reflected on everything. The mistakes, the missed opportunities, the things left unsaid. I realized just how much I had taken for granted. I had been so focused on seeking validation outside of my marriage, so desperate to feel something, anything, that I had lost sight of what really mattered. I had always told myself that I was looking for excitement, for something to make me feel alive again. But in the process, I had broken the most important thing I had, my connection with Daniel. I had forgotten that love is not about excitement or novelty. It's about the quiet moments, the small gestures, the things that make you feel seen, heard, and cared for. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing him. I had stopped hearing him. I couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't change the choices I had made. But I had to face the truth. My need for excitement, for validation, had come at the cost of something far more meaningful. I had traded something real for something fleeting. And now, as I sat in the silence of the house we had shared, I realized that I had nothing left but the quiet ache of regret. In the end, it wasn't just the marriage that had broken. It was me, too. The woman who had gone searching for something outside of herself, who had forgotten what it meant to be present, to be whole. I had to rebuild, but I didn't know where to start. The loss was deeper than I had expected. It wasn't just the absence of Daniel that stung. It was the realization that in seeking something more, I had lost everything that truly mattered. And as the days stretched on, I was left to grapple with the consequences of my choices, trying to find a way to move forward when the past had already slipped away. The house felt unbearably quiet in the days after Daniel left. Each corner, each empty room echoed with the absence of someone who had once been a constant presence in my life. The silence, which had been oppressive even when we were together, now seemed deafening. I had never truly understood the depth of my own loneliness until I was alone in this house, without the comfort of his indifference, without the numbness of our disconnected routine. At first, I tried to fill the silence with things, TV shows, books, random activities, but nothing worked. The house felt like a shell, empty of everything that once mattered. The excitement I had sought for so long had been a distraction, a temporary high, but now that I was left with nothing but myself, I realized how hollow it had been. It didn't fill the void. It only made it bigger. I spent the first few days after Daniel's departure in a haze of confusion and regret, not knowing what to do with myself. The guilt still gnawed at me. How could I have let it get this far? But amidst the guilt, there was also a quiet recognition of something else. I had a chance now to rebuild. Not just my marriage, but me. I had been so focused on finding something external, excitement, attention, validation, that I had never stopped to ask myself what I needed on a deeper level. I had spent so many years trying to fill an emptiness I couldn't even understand, never realizing that the only way out of that emptiness was through myself. It started small. I signed up for a yoga class, something I had always thought I'd never have time for. But in those quiet hours on the mat, I began to feel a shift. My body, once stiff and disconnected from myself, started to loosen. The tightness in my chest, the constant weight of unspoken feelings, began to ease. I realized I had been holding my breath for far too long, living in a state of emotional paralysis. Yoga was my first step back into my own body, my own soul. Then I started to travel, just short trips, weekend getaways, places I had always wanted to visit, but had never made the time for. It wasn't about escaping or running away, but about exploring new spaces, both externally and within myself. I didn't need the validation of strangers or the attention of men to feel alive. I needed to connect with the world around me, to see it through a lens of curiosity rather than a search for distraction. I met new people, some fleeting connections, others more meaningful. I found myself laughing more, noticing the beauty of the small things, the way the sunlight hit the pavement in the early morning, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves, the simple joy of walking through a crowded city street without a destination in mind. For the first time in a long time, I felt present in my own life. I wasn't seeking anything outside myself to make me feel whole. I was simply living, being, existing without the pressure to fill some invisible gap. The more I let go of the need to be validated by others, the more I realized that the emptiness I had felt for so long wasn't something I could fix with external sources. It was an internal ache, a disconnect from myself, from the woman I had once been, the woman I had forgotten. As I began to reconnect with that version of me, I started to see how much I had lost in my quest for something more. I also realized that I had always been looking for something outside of myself to fix the relationship with Daniel. I thought that if I could just find a spark, a feeling, some excitement, everything would fall into place. But I had been so wrong. The work had to be done within me, and within our relationship. I hadn't given Daniel the chance to meet me halfway. I hadn't nurtured the love that was there before it started to wither. Instead, I had sought solace in distractions, in empty experiences, in a fleeting sense of being wanted. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the choices I had made. But I was learning something invaluable. The only way to move forward was to stop looking back, to stop seeking answers from other people, from external circumstances. The only real source of healing was me, and I was beginning to understand that. One afternoon, after a walk in the park, I stopped by a cafe and sat by the window, watching people pass by. I sipped my coffee, allowing myself a moment of peace. It was quiet, just the soft murmur of conversations around me. And as I sat there, I thought about the woman I had been. I thought about the mistakes, the missteps, the choices I regretted. But I also thought about the woman I was becoming, the woman who was learning how to be okay on her own, how to live fully without relying on someone else to define her. I didn't have all the answers. I wasn't fixed, and I wasn't whole yet. But I was moving forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on a path to something better. Not a perfect version of myself, but a real one. A woman who had learned that excitement could never replace the quiet satisfaction of being true to yourself. Later that evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. For a long time, I had been avoiding that reflection. I didn't want to see the woman I had become, the one who had let the cracks in her marriage grow too deep, the one who had searched for something she didn't need. But tonight, I saw something different. I saw a woman who had been through pain, who had made mistakes, but who was also learning to accept herself. I didn't recognize the version of me who had once sought validation in the wrong places, but I was beginning to understand her. I could see her now, the woman who was learning to rebuild, to find peace within herself. It was a small, fragile feeling, but it was there, growing inside me. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't healed. But I was moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The journey wasn't over, but it had begun. And that, in itself, was the most important step of all.